We're in a sermon series that's also our motto for 2023, and it's called Not Just Sundays. I see several of the shirts here. If you want one, we still have them. I think we're out of small, but we do have all of the other sizes. If we need to reorder, if you want a small, just let us know and we can reorder that. We're going through our mission statement, which is to be the light. Last week we looked at the L, which is love God, love people. This week we're looking at the I, and that stands for impact community. Our goal here is not just that we have an impact within these four walls, but that we impact the community around us. And to do that, we ask the question, we say, if this church were to cease being in existence tomorrow, for whatever reason, would anybody in the community, would they even notice, and would they even care? And if the answer is no, we haven't done our job. We haven't impacted the community like we want. As a church, we're called to impact the community around us, and that's Carl Junction. So that's our city. So when I talk about impacting community as a church, I'm talking about the community of Carl Junction, Joplin, Webb City, Airport Drive, wherever all these places are. We've got like 5 cities. I had a Ministerial Alliance meeting last week, and the pastor of the church on the other end of Gum Road, the Baptist church, was there, and he said, our ditch is in Webb City, our church is in Carl Junction, and this ditch is in Airport Drive. So 3 communities come together right there. And that's who we're called to impact. But you have a community in your life that you're called to impact too. So when I talk about it as a church, I'm talking about Carl Junction. When I talk about you impacting your community individually, that's the people you work with, the people you have that are family members that we don't have access to. That's your friend groups. That's the parents on your kids' sports teams. That is everybody around that you can have a direct impact on. That's your community. So we have a church community we want to impact, and we have individual communities that we want you to impact as well. It's interesting because the letters of the mission statement kind of go in order. You have to love God and you have to love people before you can impact your community. And after you impact your community, you still need to grow yourselves, you still need to honor God, and you have to do all that before you can tell others. If you don't have an impact, then you don't earn the right to tell others. You haven't earned that in their life, and we'll talk about that here in a little bit. So what does Jesus say about impacting community? And to find the answer to that, we're going to look in Matthew 5. Matthew 5. We're going to start at verse 13. This passage is at the beginning of the most famous sermon ever preached. And we know that is called the Sermon on the Mount. This summer, I plan, as long as the Lord doesn't change my mind between now and then, to do a sermon series called The Best Sermon Ever. And it's not my sermon, but we're going to spend several months, the summer months, in a series on these passages, the Sermon on the Mount. And so today, I guess you're getting a preview of our summer series that's coming up. As you get to Matthew 5, you see that the majority of the letters in Matthew 5, 6, and 7 are in red. If you're a new believer, that means Jesus said those. Jesus spoke those. And so this is Jesus speaking. Matthew 5, verse 13 says, "You are the salt of the earth. But if salt has lost its taste, how shall its saltiness be restored? It is no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled under people's feet. You are the light of the world. A city set on a hill cannot be hidden. Nor do people light a lamp and put it under a basket, but on a stand, and if it gives light to all in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, so that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father who is in heaven. Jesus is talking metaphorically here, and he says you're supposed to be two things. He says you're supposed to be salt, and you're supposed to be light. If you are playing a word association game, typically salt and light would have absolutely nothing to do with each other. If you think salt, the first thing that pops into your mind is typically not, oh, light. You know, if I said, okay, light, what's the first word that pops into your head? Salt. No. That's not what we would think. What in the world do these two words have in common? The answer is that both are change agents. Both bring change to whatever it is that they touch. Salt instantly brings a change. Light instantly brings a change. Jesus didn't just use these two words randomly. He knew what he was saying. He knew that both of these words are change agents. And he also knew that 2,000 years down the road, people would still be using salt and people would still have light. You don't go anywhere in the world where they don't have salt or light. They may have a different word for it because we don't all speak the same language, but it's still salt and it's still light everywhere. It's something that's universal that everybody can understand. Beyond that, both of these words carry enormous influence. Both have an immediate impact. Both are difficult to hide, especially if you're in my dad's house. You can't hide salt because he'll find it. So we're going to dig a little deeper. What do these words mean? We're going to look at 3 things that are associated with salt, 4 things that are associated with light, because 7's the number of perfection, right? And so that'll make this the perfect sermon. Let's start the way Jesus did with salt. What's a characteristic of salt? Salt is a preservative. In the time of Jesus, this was the most important function of salt because they didn't have refrigerators. They didn't have freezers. You couldn't just throw your leftovers into the refrigerator and then heat them up again the next day. No, they were bad. This was a hot, humid place, and stuff went bad fast. So they'd pack all of their meat in salt, and that would prevent it from decomposing and decaying. That was their form of a refrigerator. It prevented the meat from spoiling. It prevented the meat from going bad. And that's what we've noticed about food. It has to have some type of preservative in it, or else it goes bad. Look at a banana that you leave on your counter. It goes bad fast. We have those, and we throw them out all the time because when they get black, they're nasty. There's no use for them. Some people make bread or whatever. I get that. Other than that, there's no use for it. I'm not eating that mushy old thing. If you could make a preservative for bananas, you'd be a billionaire. You'd be a trillionaire if it didn't cause cancer or something. Here's what Jesus is saying. He's saying, look around at this world, and you can see that it's in a state of decay. You can see that it's getting worse every single day. We've seen that in our lifetimes. Your grandparents talked about that in their lifetimes, right? You remember, we become the grandparents after a while, don't we? Those things that our grandparents said to us, we're like, did I just say that to my kid? Okay, that's the test of getting old, I guess. That's the way the world is. It's been getting progressively worse for 2,000 years, and the world needs a preservative. The world needs a salt, and so Jesus says, you are the salt of the earth. We are the preservative of the world. We are to bring God's word and God's ways and the influence of Jesus Christ into this society that's all around us, and we are to preserve it the best that we can. Let me ask you this. Can you imagine, no matter how bad you think the world is today, can you imagine how bad it would be if there were no Christians? If there were no churches? If there were no religious organizations? If there were no charitable organizations with Christian values? Those of you who were here in 2011, after the tornado, if you had anything to do with the tornado, you know how bad that would be. Because every single place that rolled it, Samaritan's Purse was huge here. Guess what? They're a religious organization. The Red Cross, guess what? Religious organization. Think about these different things. Every one of them. You had Baptist, was it Baptist or Methodist who had the chainsaw? I can't remember. Somebody came in and they were a chainsaw group and they just went around sawing up trees. How many atheist groups did you see? How many Satan worshipers did you see? Zero. We're called to be salt. We're called to be light. And if you think about how bad the world is now, I would hate to see how bad it would be if you take all of the Christian influence out of it. Because the Holy Spirit is here and He is holding back the forces of evil. And we assist Him in that task. We do it through our words. We do it through our actions. We do it through our lawmakers. We do it through all of these different ways. But He says to Christians, He says, you are the salt of the earth. The world is in moral decay, and it is your responsibility to keep the world from going bad. Why does it seem to be getting worse then? Here's the answer. I said this Wednesday night. We live in a post-Christian world. The days of everybody being a Christian are gone. If you think they're coming back, you better be praying really hard, because without an intervention from God, we're not going back to the way it was. We're going the opposite direction, which is why we're called to be preservatives. We're called to be the salt. We're called to be the light. But over the years, Christians have neglected this. If you read any book, you can go to Mardel, probably find several on the $1, $3, $5 shelf on the decline of a church. What they'll tell you is the first thing you look for is that the church's focus is inward. You're looking here all the time. Okay, what songs are we singing? What color's the carpet? What color are the pew? They say that's the number one characteristic of a dying church. Why? Because you're not being the salt. You're not being the light. You've lost your focus. Our focus is not on us. Our focus is on everybody around us and reaching them and being the preservative in the society. And you can't do that if you're focused on yourself. The church has lost its influence over the years. There's another reason the church has lost its influence over the years. It's because the church looks just like society. And you cannot be the exact same as society and influence society. If you're not influencing society, society is influencing you. And that's what's happened in so many churches today. And that's why you see churches going against the flat biblical Word of God and taking stands against the Word of God. It's because instead of being salt, they've been part of the decay. We're to make a difference. This means being an obvious follower of Christ no matter where we're at. We ought to stand out. And we ought to be different than the world around us. It goes completely against this societal expectation that we're supposed to just be private, to not say a word about how we feel about religion or Jesus. That's a scheme from the devil. And it goes against that because we are called to stand out You say, well, I just show people through my actions. They don't know why you're acting that way. Words and actions have to come together so that they know. How do you stop the world from going bad if you're going right along with it? You can't. Salt preserves. Second thing, salt seasons and salt flavors. I tell you, there is nothing as good as a piece of hot corn on the cob, just come out of the water, still dripping, still hot. You put that butter on it, it melts right there. My wife's dad had, I don't know if he did, he's got this brilliant thing. You take a heel of bread. Nobody eats the heels of bread, right? You take a heel of bread. This is what they're good for. This is why if you come to our house, you'll see like 20 heels of bread in the bread basket. There's nothing. This is what they're good for. When you're eating corn on the cob, you put it on a little plate. You put a whole bunch of butter in the middle. And then you put your little corn, what do you call those? Heather calls them pickers, but you're not picking it. I don't know what it's called. The little things that stick in the end that you can hold your corn on the cob with. You stick those in there and you roll it around in the butter till it's dripping. And when you take a bite, if it doesn't drip down your chin, and if you have a beard, if it's not in your beard, you are not doing it right. Now that's good. But you know what makes it even better? Is when you take the salt shaker and you make it white. It should not be yellow when you eat it. It ought to be white. The yellow ought to come from the butter. The white ought to come from the salt. You shouldn't even be able to see the corn. I've raised one boy right. He knows how to eat corn on the cob. The other one's not there yet, but we'll get him there. Sounds like a heart attack waiting to happen, doesn't it? Salt flavors. Salt seasons. Christians should enhance and favorably season the world around them. People ought to look at your life, and people ought to be better off because of your life, because they see what's going on. Christians should be active in the world and have a positive influence. For far too long, we've had a negative influence. For far too long, we've said, this is what we're preaching against. How about we preach of what we're for? Let the Holy Spirit work out what we're against, because He'll do it in their lives. He did it in mine, and He did it in yours. We are called to be active in the world and to be a positive influence on the lives of people around us. At our workplaces, at our homes, in schools, even in Walmart, or when we're waiting on our meals. Politics, culture, art, every single aspect. We are called to flavor and to season the society around us. Without compromising the gospel, we are called to be a positive influence on everything around us. Some people who are followers of Christ believe just the opposite. They think the only way I can avoid acting like the world is to avoid the world. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to lock myself in my house. I'm never going out. I'm never going to talk to people. I'm never going to interact with anybody because they might influence me. And so they lock themselves away and they say, if I'm not influenced by anybody, then I'm not going to sin. That's not what he says here. He says, you are the salt of the earth. Think about that salt shaker. We have one sitting on our stove. We have one sitting on the dining room table. If I've got that piece of corn on the cob right there, if I've already rolled it in all the butter, if I want to make it better, I can't just look at the salt. I've got to take the salt shaker and I've got to tip it upside down, and the salt has to come out. The salt has to season. And that's the way it is as a follower of Christ. The salt has to be poured out. You have to interact with people. You have to interact with people who are disagreeing with you religiously, who are disagreeing with you politically. That's our life as Christians. The salt has to be poured out. Now, let me give you a couple of caveats. My great-grandma used to bring green beans to Christmas and Thanksgiving. I loved her green beans because she put enough salt on the green beans to kill the taste of the green beans. That's the point, right? You either got to put enough bacon or enough salt in there so that you don't taste the green beans. My grandma, not to my great-grandma's face, nobody would do that. Wouldn't want to hurt somebody's feelings, but I wish she would use a little less salt on these green beans. I can just hear in my mind, oh, Mom's going to bring her green beans, and they're going to be so salty, they're not fit to eat. That was my grandma's term right there, not fit to eat. Here's the thing. Everybody's salt preference is a little bit different. You may not like any salt on your green beans. There were weirdos that came into Wendy's who ordered no salt fries. What is wrong with them? Maybe they had a health issue. I'm gonna believe that over their lives. No, I'm kidding. But everybody's salt preference is different. Some people like just a little bit of salt on things. Some people like a whole lot of salt on things. Some people salt weird things. I won't give you examples of that. Here's the thing. Sometimes when we pour our salt all over somebody, it's too much. And they're going to fight back. And they're going to be like, whoa, that's a little too much salt for my taste. And then what happens? They don't ask Grandma Vera to bring the green beans next time. They ask her to bring the rolls. Because you can buy those at the store and not salt them, right? You got to watch the level of salt. Some people like way more salt. And so you've got to be an active presence in their life. You've got to be more. You've got to be there. You've got to, if something's wrong, you've got to make a call. Some people like just a little bit of salt, and you've got to know when to back off. You say, how do I know the difference? You rely on the Holy Spirit. And the Holy Spirit shows you and tells you. Third thing, salt stimulates thirst. Salt stimulates thirst. I love it when I order French fries and they are just covered in salt. I know I make it sound like I love salt, but really it's corn on the cob, green beans, and French fries. Anything else I can do without. Don't care if I have salt or not. My dad's salt is pizza. Not kidding you. Not me. I don't care about that. Bob does too. I know, though, if I'm eating that piece of corn on the cob or I'm getting those fries that somebody like me when I worked at Wendy's salted, I know I better have a drink handy because I'm going to get thirsty. Because I know salt will stimulate thirst. And when you're thirsty, you have to have a drink. And I love how the Bible is written because this is written by Matthew. But if you go over to the book of John, which is, you're not going to believe this, written by a guy named John. I know it's hard to believe, isn't it? If you put these two together, Jesus said, you are the salt of the earth. Salt makes you thirsty. If you look to John, what did he say? I am the living water. He's the one. If you come to me, you'll never be thirsty. Isn't it amazing how these two books written years apart by two different people go hand in hand and fit together perfectly? It's amazing to me. Our words, our actions, our lives ought to leave a spiritual thirst in people where they see there's something more out there. Something that they're not getting quenched is available to them. Our lives should make people thirst for God. Now, before he moves on, Jesus gives a warning. He says, but if salt has lost its taste, how shall its saltiness be restored? He says, it is no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled under people's feet. That's a warning. If salt loses its saltiness, what's the purpose of it? You throw it out. You throw it into the trash. But here's the interesting thing. Salt on its own can never lose its saltiness, because sodium chloride is a stable compound. You say, well, I've had to throw salt out before. Yeah, that's because something came in and something affected that salt. When we have our salt sitting on the stove and when people boil things and all that water comes, sometimes the moisture gets into the salt. And so that's why sometimes you'll see people with rice in their salt. That's to prevent moisture. The rice, I guess, soaks up the moisture. Ask somebody who's in the kitchen more than me, but that's what I've always assumed it does. But you have some agent coming in and changing the compound of that salt. And that's what happens so many times in our lives. We have something that comes in and something that changes us, something that makes us lose our saltiness. And what he's talking about here, he's talking about compromise. He's talking about compromising our belief. He's talking about compromising our faith. He's not talking about losing your salvation. He's talking about losing your influence on the world around you. When the church or when an individual morally compromises themselves, then their saltiness is at stake. Their witness is at stake. Their reputation is at stake. You look at some of these churches right now where the pastor has been accused of sexual misconduct. And I saw one where a pastor was arrested. The prosecutor declined to press charges, but it was a whole fishy thing. It's not like, no, we didn't have enough evidence. They let him back in the pulpit. And that church is suffering because of the reputation. And it's a reputation thing, and it is in your life too. When you begin to compromise, people around you see that. And so when the church loses its saltiness, it loses its reputation. When you as an individual lose your saltiness, you lose your witness. That's what Jesus means when he says, how can it be made salty again? When the church loses its reputation, it's hard to get it back. How many people are already convinced that the church is full of hypocrites? And then when something like this happens, their point is well taken. Their point is proven. The reality is we're all hypocrites. We're all sinners that are saved by grace, who are not perfect, who are relying on the Lord Jesus Christ every single day to get us through. But the world doesn't understand that. When the church acts like everyone else, and when we as individuals act like everyone else, we lose our saltiness. When the church loses its saltiness, it loses its mission. It's what Jesus said. When you lose your saltiness, you might as well throw it out and let people trample all over it. Our mission is to be in the world, but not to be of the world. It's to be different. It's to be, as we'll talk about in a minute, that light sitting on the hill. We are the salt of the earth. We need to be mixed in with society, flavoring and preserving, and adding flavor to everybody around us. Second one is light. He says, you are the light of the world. A city set on a hill cannot be hidden. Nor do people light a lamp and put it under a basket, but on a stand, and it gives light to all in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others so that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father who is in heaven. Jesus tells us, he says, you are the light of the world. That's what he tells us here in Matthew. And we just talked about how these go together so well. But this time he says something different in John. This time he says, I am the light of the world. And he's referring to himself. And so in Matthew it says, we are the light of the world. In John it says, he is the light of the world. Well, that's an obvious contradiction, right? We just got to throw the Bible out. No. there's no contradiction at all. You say, how's that not a contradiction? If he says, we're the light of the world, and he says, I'm the light of the world, here's how it's not. You ever looked up on a full moon and you see the light that the moon is putting off? That's a trick question, because the answer is no. You never have. You may have looked up and seen the full moon, and you may have looked outside and it looks like it's daylight, but you're not seeing the light of the moon at all. You are seeing the light of the sun that is reflecting off of the moon. And that's what we are called to do as Christ. Jesus Christ is the light of the world. But we are the light of the world because we're like the moon and we reflect His light out onto society. We have no light in us at all. His light is what is put into us, and that's what we reflect out onto society. Jesus is the source of the light, making us the light of the world because we reflect His light. If we're the light, what does that imply? That we're living in darkness. And it doesn't take much to look around. All you got to do is get notifications on your phone of news stories. Mass shooting last night in California. 10 people dead, more wounded. Kid in Oklahoma. They've been looking for that girl. They found her finally. How long were they looking for? A week. Babysitters killed her. You have 6-year-olds bringing guns to school, shooting their teachers. You don't have to look very far to know that we live in darkness. The world is in darkness, it's in deception, it's willfully ignorant, and it's in rebellion. It's the truth. And the world doesn't know the way to God. Here's what Jesus told Paul in Acts 26. The letters are in red. It says, I am sending you to them to open their eyes and turn them from darkness to light, and from the power of Satan to God. Jesus told Paul that. It's the same today. The world is in darkness. The world doesn't know the way to God. And so we are to be the light reflecting that way. That's our whole mission statement here at this church. To be the light leading the lost home. The world doesn't know God, and it sure doesn't know His ways. But we're supposed to reflect those into society so that people know them and so that people understand them. And that's not just on Sundays. That's in our home lives. That's in the lives with our kids. That's at ball games when the 16-year-old referee is making bad calls about the fouls or not calling balls and strikes. That is when you're at a restaurant and you have the worst waitress in the world. You're still called to reflect the love and the light of Jesus Christ, even if they're doing a bad job. There's no exceptions. Christians are to be the light in this dark world. So let's look at the characteristics of light. The first one is light shines. We are to stand out as followers of Christ. I said this a few minutes ago, but if we are dark, we're not lighting anything up. We're to be different. We're to reflect the light. Jesus has set us up on a hill for everyone to see. And whether you know it or not, if you've ever mentioned the word Jesus, if you've ever said, I'm praying for you, somebody's looking at you like you're a follower of Christ. And they're waiting for you to mess up. And Jesus says, I've put you up here. You're a light. You're a city on a hill. And so there should be something different about you. There ought to be difference in how you go through things. There ought to be a difference that makes you stand out. When I was growing up, there was a song by the Newsboys. I don't even think they're around anymore. But here's what the lyrics said. It says, shine, make them wonder what you got. Make them wish that they were not on the outside looking in. Shine, let it shine before all men. Let them see good works, and then let them glorify the Lord. I never thought of that song because I was 16 or whatever. I never thought of that song applying to this scripture. But it does perfectly. That's where it came from. Light shines, and so we're to stand out. We're to shine. Second thing, Light reveals. We just bought new furniture for our living room. We got the couch that we had had when I was in law school. I graduated law school in 2004. We did not get it the year I graduated. So that couch was 19, 20, 21 years old, and guess what? We bought it used. We've had that couch that long. And so we had a couch, we had a chair that came from my grandpa's. I think it was my great-grandma's before then, and it was well used, well loved is how we put it on Facebook. And it was crazy. We get this new furniture, which is not as comfortable, by the way, as the old stuff, but we get this new furniture. We decide to rearrange the whole living room. And so the TV was here. We moved the TV back here on the opposite wall. And then the couch was here. No, the couch was here. We moved the couch here. My chairs were here. We moved my chair over in the corner. It's just crazy. The first night I walk in there, it's pitch black. Oh yeah, and we put the light way back at the far corner so that you got to walk between the couch and the chair to turn it on or shut it off. And I'm walking through here and I'm just doing one of these, because I don't want to hit something, and I want to make sure I get the light. But once I got the light, the whole room was revealed. And then I could hop, skip, or jump across the room if I wanted to, because it really opened up our living room. We have a lot more room in there now. I don't know why we didn't move the furniture a long time ago. That's what light does. It reveals. It reveals. That's why the world hates the church. Because your light ought to reveal some things. Not that we're judging people, but our actions, when people see that, ought to think, man, maybe I ought to act like that. It's because the Holy Spirit's changing us. The Holy Spirit is working in us, and people see that and they want to live up to that. They know they can't do it on their own. We know we can't do it on our own. We have to allow the Spirit of God. It reveals things in us, and it reveals things in other people too. We point to God. That's what we reveal. Jesus Christ. I've seen people who were diagnosed with terminal cancer. They're not upset. They don't go through how many ever stages of grieving there are. They say, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to live each day until I'm with Jesus. And it's a completely different attitude than somebody who doesn't know Jesus, who is clinging to life. It's a different mindset, and it's a different mentality, and we're supposed to reveal that in our lives. We're supposed to reveal. It's not because I'm just a very soothing person that I'm so calm. It's because Jesus Christ gives me the peace that passes all understanding, and it's because I know and I have a hope that there's more to this life than I'm experiencing right here. We are to reveal it to other people. They're not going to find the answer in the world, so we reveal it to them. Third thing light does is it awakens. We had to put blackout curtains in our bedroom because I don't sleep in very often, but when I do, the light comes right into that room, and we have like 25 windows. No, it's not that many. I'm exaggerating, but that's what it seems like, right in our bedroom. And so Heather bought these big blackout curtains because if I want to sleep in past like 7 o'clock some mornings, we got to have that light blocked out. That's what light does. It wakes us up. And so we have the light of the world, us, reflecting Christ's love, trying to wake people up all around us because the world's asleep. If Jesus Christ came back today, how anybody would know wasn't Jesus Christ coming back with all these movies like Left Behind? I don't know, but there will be people who have no clue what's going on. They're going to think UFOs came and abducted everybody. They're going to think that the government had some, this would probably be the number one on the list, the government had some conspiracy, some experiment where everybody was wiped out. And you know what they'll say? All the bad people we're wiped out. That's what they're going to say because we'll all be gone. You're going to see that. The light wakes people up to that. Fourth thing the light does is it warns. What's the purpose of a lighthouse? To say, hey, there's a cliff here. Don't come this way. There's a cliff here. There's a cliff here. There's a current here. It's to warn. And our purpose as light of Christians is to warn of impending danger. Judgment is coming. Jesus is coming. Be ready. The salt passage ended with this warning. He says, don't lose your saltiness or you'll be trampled underfoot. But this light section ends with an encouragement. I love Jesus. You know, that's what people teach people to do these days. Tell them one good thing, tell them one bad thing. Jesus was doing that 2,000 years ago. That's amazing. He says, in the same way, let your light shine before men that they may see your good deeds and praise your Father in heaven. Listen, that's not a suggestion. He says, let your light shine before men. That's a command. It says, people will see your good deeds. The word there means attractive or pleasing. It's not good in the moral sense. It's attractive or pleasing. Now, our deeds ought to be moral, but people ought to see that we enjoy serving Christ. You ever seen a Christian who is unhappy all the time? And if you are an unbeliever, you're like, I don't know who that is, but I don't want to be like them. Don't look around. Don't picture somebody in your mind. But we all know people like that. We're supposed to reflect the light of Jesus. We're supposed to reflect the joy. We're supposed to reflect the peace. Our deeds ought to be moral, but when you let your light shine, people ought to see them, and the words ought to match the actions. Can't say that enough. Second thing he says is people are going to praise your Father in heaven. Why do you let it shine? Number one, so people can see your good deeds. Number two, when they see your good deeds, they're going to praise who? Your Father in heaven. It's not, I'm going to do my good deeds so that they praise me. No. I love the Casting Crowns. They're one of the biggest Christian music artists that there are. He's a youth pastor. He refuses to move. He does worship on Sunday morning. Wouldn't you like to go to that church? Casting Crowns as your worship leader? Wow, that's awesome. If I ever go to Atlanta, which I think is where their church is, that's the church I'm visiting, even though I think they're Baptist, but that's where I'm going. Here is the cool thing about them. They have this song that says, it's not about us, it's called Only Jesus. He says, I don't want to leave a legacy. I don't care if people remember me, only Jesus. Our works ought not to bring glory to us, but to our Father in heaven. Ultimately, you do good works, not so people see you, but so they see Him. Jesus said, you are the salt of the earth. Jesus said, you are the light of the world. He doesn't say you will be. He doesn't say you should be. He says we are. We are. No matter where we're at in our walk, we are. I'm going to read this verse one more time. But this time I want to read it from the Message Bible. If you're studying the Bible, don't study the Message Bible. If you can't understand a passage, the Message Bible sometimes helps to put it in plain language. So let me read it from here. He says, let me tell you why you are here. You're here to be salt, seasoning that brings out the God flavors of this earth. If you lose your saltiness, how will people taste godliness? You've lost your usefulness and will end up in the garbage. Here's another way to put it. You're here to be light, bringing out the God colors in the world. God is not a secret to be kept. We're going public with this, as public as a city on a hill. If I make you light bearers, you don't think I'm going to hide you under a bucket, do you? I'm going to put you on a light stand. Now that I put you there on a hilltop, on a light stand, shine. Keep open house. Be generous with your lives. By opening up to others, you'll prompt people to open up with God, this generous Father in heaven. Doesn't get any plainer than that. Close with this. If you have a Fire Bible, this is straight from the commentary. It says, as Christians, we have the privilege of lighting the way to God, reflecting the life, love, and light of His Son, Jesus. Now look what it says. If you underline in your commentaries, underline this. It says, this happens not only through words, but often, more effectively, through actions. In order to truly show people who Jesus is and what He is like, we must follow His example and be among people as ones who serve. We should actively look for ways to assist others and meet their needs at home, at school, on the job, and in every aspect of life. By serving people, we reflect Christ's humility and show His compassion. We break down barriers of resistance and opposition to the truth of God's Word and the reality of Jesus' life-changing power. He goes on to say we can serve people through simple acts of kindness, but listen to what he says here. I love this. He says, but many people will not pay attention to the message unless it comes from someone who cares enough to meet their practical needs. This is what I was talking about. Sometimes to speak into somebody's life, you have to earn that right. These people that stand on the corner up here with signs, as a pastor, they get none of my attention. I don't care if their sign says John 3:16. I don't care if it says abortion killed. They don't get my attention. Why? Because I don't know if they're nuts or not. I don't know anything about them. They could think their pastor's Jesus Christ. I don't know who they are. But somebody that has my attention is somebody I've spent time with. A pastor who mentors me, somebody who has worked, put time in, that I trust and that I know, and that's what we have to do sometimes to earn an audience with somebody. I'm not saying people can't get saved by you walking up onto the street and witnessing, but I'll tell you, people will get saved a lot more if they've observed your actions for a while, if they know why you're living that way, and then you speak into their lives. John come. He says, for example, there may be times when we must give food for a person's stomach. I love this. Get a Fire Bible. I don't make any money if you buy one, but it's good commentary. Listen to this. For example, there may be times when we must give food for a person's stomach before we can feed his or her soul. He says, or perhaps we need to help clean up a neighborhood before we try to help clean up the lives of people living in that neighborhood. When you work against injustice, share food and clothes, help your family and anyone else who is oppressed, then shall your light rise in the darkness. And he refers to Isaiah 58, 6 through 10. That's powerful right there. It's our actions. You say, why do you do a harvest party on October 31st out here? Do you even tell people about Jesus? No, not unless they ask. If they ask, I'll be glad to tell them about Jesus. We slip a little brochure in there that tells them about Jesus. But you know why we have a harvest party? It's to get people here and to say, hey, that first assembly, I thought they hung from the chandeliers. And it's to say, come on into our building. We don't have chandeliers. We're normal people. We love Jesus. We're just like you, only we've accepted Christ and we've accepted His grace. Why do you go to Second Tuesday? It's to show people that we love kids and we want to have an impact on those kids. We don't want society to continue in the trends it's been. We don't want grandparents and great-grandparents raising kids. We want parents raising kids the way it's supposed to be. We want grandparents to be grandparents and great-grandparents to be great-grand. They ought to be spoiling kids, not disciplining them. We want to change that. You say, do you give parenting classes? No, we show them, hey, we're normal. Come out to our church. Then they get to know us. Then we can give them parenting classes. Somebody who's better at it than me can give them parenting classes. That's our goal. Impact community. Would you stand with me this morning? The goal of our church is to impact Carl Junction. If I'm honest, we've not done a great job at that. Unfortunately, as 2020 came, that cut off a whole lot of mechanisms. And we're just now getting back. But here's what I can promise you. That goal's not going by the wayside. And we're looking for ways to impact this community right now. We're not going to have a food pantry. You say, why not? That's a good thing. It sure is, but there's a food pantry right there. You know what we're going to do? We're going to do something nobody else is doing. Because what's the point of every church doing the same thing? Then it's, oh, this church does it better. Let's just do what nobody else is doing. Let's reach a community nobody else has reached. You say, what is that? Pray with me about it. Let's find the need. And let's impact the community. Here's how I'm going to close this today. That's our goal as a church. Your goal is to impact the community around you. You have a community I can't reach. People say, oh, it's the pastor's job. No, it's not the pastor's job. I can't go to work with you, and I can't sit in the break room with people and preach the gospel. I can't go to school with you guys and walk the halls with you with my Bible in hand. I can't do it. But you can, and you can. That's your community. So as we close this morning, picture somebody. If you have to close your eyes, close your eyes. Picture somebody that you can have an impact on this week. That doesn't mean you go up and just start sharing the gospel. Maybe you've not earned that right in their life yet. But you can impact them through a word, through an action. Some of you have done that. You brought food today. You've impacted somebody in this church and people outside of this church by feeding them tomorrow. That's what we're talking about here. Acts, words coming together. Who are you picturing?